With the 2017 murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, as well as the deaths of 4 sisters who were killed in an intentionally set house fire just 3 months before and 9 miles away in the town of Flora, Indiana, many folks across the state, country, and even the world have taken a particular interest in Carroll County, Indiana, to ask the question, why did this happen? And are your children truly safe in Carroll County? And then came the seemingly orchestrated arrest of Richard Allen, who many of us believe is an innocent man. The proceedings in his case have been cloaked in secrecy and have many scratching their heads asking if there's something deeper going on here. While the powers that be in Carroll County are more than happy to see this man go down for this crime, without much regard at all for his rights to due process and making sure they have the right person behind bars. I myself am a firm believer that history repeats itself, and by looking to the past and studying history, we can perhaps shed some light and connect some dots on the beliefs, behaviors, and social pathology of this small, rural American community. So sit back and relax, because I have a shocking yet all too familiar story to tell you, and it starts with the disappearance of a young woman, followed by the discovery of a badly decomposed body believed to be of a woman washed up on the banks of the Wabash River in February 1887. What followed was the persecution of a perceived outsider, an angry mob, and vigilante justice in Delphi, Indiana. Our story begins with the Mabbitt family, who were some of the first settlers in Carroll County. The father, William Mabbitt, was both wealthy and respectable. The children were all attractive, intelligent, and popular. But the belle of the family was 23-year-old Luella, who naturally had many suitors. Her favored beau was a man 10 years her senior named Armour Green. At 34 years old, Green was tall, good-looking, with manly features. But Luella's father did not approve of his daughter's suitor. So, reluctantly, Luella told Armour that they had to break up. She would return his love letters and he was to return hers. On August 6, 1886, Armour Green with his friend William Walker took a buggy ride to the Mabbitt home in Wildcat, Indiana, which is just outside of Delphi. Her parents saw Luella leave the house with the letters, but she never came back. William Mabbitt believed that his daughter had been kidnapped by Armour Green. Green and Walker were both questioned by authorities, but both denied any knowledge of Luella's whereabouts. In the days that followed, search parties were organized in the area around Wildcat Creek. William Mabbitt hired a private detective and offered a reward of $500 for the apprehension of his daughter's kidnappers. It was as if Luella had simply evaporated into thin air. But when Armour Green quietly slipped out of town, that only hardened local certainty that he knew exactly what had become of Luella. On August 12th, a mob of the lynching variety was soon assembled around the Green home. They dragged Armour's mother out, placed a noose around her neck, and demanded that she tell them where her son had gone. She either couldn't or wouldn't say. Eventually, the frustrated crowd let her go and left. As the prime suspect in the disappearance was unable to be found, police did the next best thing. They arrested Mrs. Green. William Walker was tossed into jail as well, apparently only because he had the bad luck to be on the scene the night Luella vanished. Meanwhile, a portion of Luella's dress was found in the creek near her father's farm. Its torn condition indicated a struggle. While this tended to reinforce the theory that Luella had been murdered, there was also a growing belief that she and Armour had eloped and would turn up safe and sound in due time. It was rumored that Armour had secretly appeared at his mother's house and told her that all was well, and Luella was being well cared for. With a lack of anyone else to prosecute, Armour's friend William Walker was tried for his alleged role in the abduction of Luella Mabbitt. On the stand, Walker gave a detailed account of his time on the night of Luella's disappearance, and it was corroborated by Luella Mabbitt's sister, Cynthia. In addition, it could not be proven that Luella was actually abducted. Walker was found not guilty. In February 1887, a body was found on the banks of the Wabash River. It was so badly decomposed as to be unrecognizable. But Luella's sister, Ella Mabbitt, and her mother believed that those were Luella's remains, largely, apparently, on the grounds that the corpse's teeth resembled Ella's. Luella's father, William, however, was unconvinced. A physician who examined the body believed the teeth were of someone much older than Luella, estimating that the corpse was of someone at least 45 years old. An article in the local paper dated February 7th notes that the flesh is entirely gone from the face and there remains nothing but the bare skull. The eyes are gone and the body has the appearance of having been sprinkled with some substance to hasten and ensure decomposition. The flesh crumbled to dust or powder when touched. Despite the lack of proof that these were the remains of Luella, the townspeople were convinced. A few days later, a newspaper would note that she was last seen in the company of her lover, Green, a worthless fellow whom she refused to marry. Green has disappeared. There is little doubt that he murdered Miss Mabbitt. Now, Amr and his brother Bill did skip town, but on July 15th, 1887, both of the Green brothers were arrested in Fort Worth, Texas, by Sheriff J.G. Stanley and brought back to Cass County, Indiana. While Amr Green was awaiting trial in Logansport, he was visited by Mr. Mabbitt. Green assured Mabbitt that his daughter was alive and well. He offered no proof, however, saying that all would be made plain at the proper time. But now that Green was captured, the people of Cass County were growing impatient with the legal process. With no positively identified body and no hard evidence against Green, it was viewed unlikely that he would be found guilty of murder. In October of 1887, 3 months after his capture, Amr was taken to Delphi for trial on the theory that the crime was committed in Carroll County. From his cell in Carroll County, Amr continued to insist that Luella was alive and well, living in Texas with a man named Samuel Payne. He refused to say any more than this, again insisting that all would eventually be made clear. If Green truly did have evidence that Luella was still among the living, he was soon to regret keeping it to himself, as the men of Delphi began to say that if the law could not punish Amr Green, well, they would have to do so themselves. On the night of October 21st, 1887, some 200 men quietly marched through the streets of Delphi surrounding the county jail. They broke their way in and confronted the sheriff, demanding the keys to the prison. When he refused, some of the mob overpowered him, and the others used sledgehammers to break the locks leading to the cells. They went straight to the cell containing Amr Green. At gunpoint, he was seized and tied up. He was led outside and forced into a covered wagon. It drove off with the bulk of the crowd following. The wagon drove to the woods of Walnut Grove, about 8 miles away. It was soon joined by a large caravan of carriages, wagons, and men on horseback. Green was taken out of the wagon in order to confess his guilt. Green maintained the calm demeanor of a man who knows he's doomed. He quietly maintained that Luella was in Fort Worth. When asked why, if this was the case, she didn't come home and resolve the mystery, he replied, "She would if I had the time to send for her." He claimed that Luella had been desperate to leave her home for some time, and on the night she vanished, he had merely assisted in her desire to run away. Among the crowd was William Mabbitt. He stepped forward and begged Green to tell the truth. What had he done with Luella? "I loved her better than my own life," Green retorted. "That is the reason I went away with her. I loved her better than you did, and all the time she has been away, I have cared for her." His words were not enough to convince a mob bent on murder. A rope was tied around a branch of a walnut tree, and the other end wrapped around Green's neck, and he stood in the wagon seat. The wagon lurched forward, leaving the condemned man dangling in the air. When it was clear that Green was dead, the crowd soon dispersed, leaving the body hanging in the tree. Before the coroner took charge of it the next day, thousands of people came to gawk at the grotesque sight. Some took a photograph of the hanging corpse, which was, I kid you not, turned into a postcard. The men responsible for Green's lynching were never punished. To this day, Green's ghost is said to haunt the grove where he died, the exact location of which is unknown and is said to be one of Delphi's best-kept secrets. In a cruel and mysterious turn of events, on the night following the lynching of Amr Green, a young woman, heavily veiled, stepped off an eastbound train in Delphi, Indiana. She went to the baggage room and asked if her trunk had arrived from Fort Worth. The Mabbitts denied that their daughter had returned. The mystery woman was never seen again, but rumors persisted. Detectives went to Fort Worth in an effort to track down this elusive Samuel Payne. Somewhat to their surprise, they found a Mrs. Orr, who claimed to live next door to Payne, and a woman who said she was his wife. Mrs. Payne was a pretty woman in her early 20s who told Mrs. Orr that she was originally from Indiana. Unfortunately, the couple had since left town for parts unknown. If this was, as Amr Green insisted with literally his dying breath, Luella Mabbitt, she was never heard from again. Luella's disappearance was far from the end of the Mabbitt family tragedies. 3 years after the lynching of Amr Green in 1890, Luella's 17-year-old sister Minnie became pregnant. Upon hearing of the news, the baby's father promptly washed his hands of her. Not knowing where else to turn, Minnie sought the help of her brothers, Oris and Mont. They helped her check into an Indianapolis hotel under the name of Mrs. Minnie Jones, where she gave birth to a daughter she named Merrill. Soon after this, the body of a baby girl was discovered in Eagle Creek. A coroner determined she had died of strangulation soon after her birth. 2 women from the hotel where Minnie had stayed identified the baby as Merrill. A buggy weight that had been used to weigh down the tiny corpse was determined to have come from the stable where Mont Mabbitt worked. It was also learned that on the night Minnie checked out of her hotel, Mont took out one of the stable's buggies. Minnie, Mont, and Oris were all arrested. Minnie soon confessed all. She stated that she had believed her brothers would place her baby in an orphanage. She last saw the child when her brothers drove her in the direction of Eagle Creek. Mont took Merrill from her and left the carriage. Oris and Minnie drove her off for a while, and when they returned, Mont was waiting for them, alone. The 3 then returned to the city. "No one told me the baby was dead," said Minnie, "but I knew it was." During her trial, the beautiful young Minnie won everyone's sympathy. It was universally believed that she was but a helpless child, completely under the control of her brothers. She was acquitted of murder, much to the approval of those in the courtroom. Eventually, Oris and Mont, who both argued that they never intended to murder the baby, were also set free. In the legal sense, this is the end of the Mabbitt saga. The lingering question of just what exactly became of Luella Mabbitt was never resolved. For many years after the fateful night in August 1886, there were periodic sightings of the supposedly murdered woman. In February 1916, her sister Ella told a reporter, quote, "For all I know, my sister may not have been murdered and may be living today," end quote. The impact that these murders and disappearances had on this family is perhaps best captured by the tone of William Mabbitt's obituary. William Mabbitt, father of Luella Mabbitt and several other erratic children, whose names are not unknown to notoriety, died in his home in Carroll County March 11th, aged 70 years. He was the father of 11 children, 8 of whom are still living. Life was a troubled sea for him. The disgrace and shame brought on his gray hairs by his own offspring, making his closing years full of agony and suffering and death a welcome. A lynching or a sacrifice, whatever you want to call it, the past reveals a history of hate, a culture of concealment and complicity, and a penchant for murder. It's time we take a stand against this organized lawlessness by demanding accountability and transparency on behalf of the victims, the falsely accused, and the innocent civilians of Carroll County.